We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
The Dialogue, the community voice of Southern California's young professional network. Relevant discussions about the thoughts, concerns, opportunities, and challenges faced by today's generational leaders. Real talk, real people. This is The Dialogue. The Dialogue with Starlett Quarles on LA Talk Live and streaming live at www.latalklive.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to The Dialogue. Real talk, real people. I'm your host, Starlett Quarles, and we're on live at latalklive.com and also streaming live at 1690 AM. The one, the voice of the voiceless. As always, The Dialogue is the voice of our generation. So thank you so much for joining us here every Wednesday from 5 to 6, where we like to discuss the topics that are relevant to today's generational leaders. Today we are continuing our month-long series, The Black Experience Part 2. We started this conversation last month in line with our event, A Dialogue with Black LA, which, as you all remember, is the call to action for the creation of an agenda for Black Los Angeles, as well as encourage more involvement in local politics, become more engaged, and to engage and get our generation holding our elected officials more accountable. But if you missed a dialogue with Black LA, don't worry. We will be making it available soon. I don't know how soon. Hopefully next month. We're working on it. But we're going to make it available for download. So please join our mailing list at thedialoguela.com. That is thedialoguela.com. As I mentioned today, we are continuing our series on the Black Experience. If you missed our conversation last week, we discussed Black Male Achievement Programs. And our guest included Edwin Lewis Henderson, who is the Executive Director of On a Mission Program, and Robert Lewis, who is the Initiative Director of the program called Bloom. So if you missed our conversation on Black Male Achievement Programs, it was great. If you have a son, definitely tune into last week's show on Black Male Achievement Programs. And you can visit our replays on our website, thedialoguela.com. On tonight's show, we want to hear from you. This is a community conversation on the tragedy of TRAYVON Martin and the ongoing George Zimmerman trial. So we want you to give us a call, 323-247-7443. That's 323-247-443. You usually open up our lines at the second half of the show, but we are opening up the lines at the top of the show because we want you to be involved in our hour-long conversation on this very, very important case to the Black community. So please give us a call, 323-247-7443. We're discussing TRAYVON Martin and the ongoing George Zimmerman trial. Our guests today include community activist Reverend Dr. Lewis Logan II, Tony Wayford, president of Choose Life and Health Wellness Center, and my producer, Steve Burton, who is getting from behind the booth and on camera today to discuss this very important case. So we're going to replay and discuss the 911 call, George Zimmerman's 911 call, as well as the police interview Zimmerman had right after the shooting. And we will also address what the community should do if, God forbid, Zimmerman is found not guilty. So if you are not up to speed on the Zimmerman trial, they are currently going through jury selection. It's been going on for about 2 weeks. As of yesterday, they narrowed down the pool to 40 potential jurors to select a final 6 jurors and 2 alternates. The 40 potential jurors consist of 16 men and 24 women. And according to news reports, they may start opening statements as early as this Friday. Now, to be kept in the loop, you got to check into HLN channel on. They are exclusively covering the entire George Zimmerman trial. And if you have to work, just TiVo it. Also tonight, HNL host Vinnie Politan will be interviewing TRAYVON's father, Tracy Martin, at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the HLN channel. So if you get a chance, please try and check that out. Again, we want to hear from you. This is our community conversation on Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman trial. Give us a call, 323 with your comments or questions. 323-247-7443. That is 323-247-7443. Or we have a new Skype number, 323-473-3100. That is 323-473-3100. Or you can always post your comments on our Facebook page at facebook.com/thedialoguela, or you can tweet me at StarQuar, or if you are so fortunate enough to have my cell number, you can text me your comment or question on today's conversation. Today's show is brought to you by Urban X Marketing and our friends at Bloom and the California Community Foundation, who are also one of our sponsors at A Dialogue with Black LA. Again, thank you to Bloom and the California Community Foundation. We could not have done it without great sponsors like you. And also, Bloom is hosting an event next Wednesday, June 26th, with Bloom spokesperson and activist and actor Lorenz Tate. And it is entitled Building a Lifetime of Options and Opportunities for Men. I will also be moderating their Bloom Initiative Town Hall, looking back, looking ahead. So I won't be here next week, but hopefully you will still be tuning in to the dialogue next Wednesday. Now, if you are interested in attending or finding out more about Bloom's event, Building a Lifetime of Options and Opportunities for Men, please check out their website at iambloom.com or call 213-537-3981. Now, before we go to a quick commercial break, I want to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth. Today, June 19th, is also known as Freedom Day or Emancipation Day, and commemorates the announcement of the abolition of slavery in Texas in 1865. So happy Juneteenth to everyone. Now we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get into our community conversation on Trayvon Martin, the tragedy of Trayvon Martin, and the George Zimmerman trial. With me, Starlett Quarles, right here on The Dialogue. Real talk, real people. We'll be right back.
Your past doesn't have to limit your potential, even for black male youth in the LA County probation system. This is actor Lorenz Tate. If our youth desire a better education and career, now or in the future, then they deserve the support of the community, businesses, organizations, and individuals like you. Bloom is a new initiative in LA helping to provide opportunities and options that are limitless. Invest in LA's black male youth today. Go to www.calfund.org/bloom or like us at facebook.com/bloom.ccf.
Do you have or know of someone with a child or adult family member with developmental disabilities that would benefit from a social recreation program in the South Los Angeles area? At Ability First's Harry A. Meyer Center at 8090 Crenshaw Boulevard in Inglewood, we offer afternoon and after-school care programs for children and adults with disabilities, which include socialization, recreation, community outings, independent living skill training, as well as physical fitness activities. You can reach us at 323-753-3101 and visit us at www.abilityfirst.org.
Welcome back to the dialogue. Real talk, real people. We are talking about Black experience all month long here on the dialogue. And again, this is part 2 of a series that we started last month. Tonight, we're having a conversation on Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman trial, the ongoing George Zimmerman trial. Like I said, this is a community conversation, so we have opened up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, your comments, your questions on the trial, on just any aspect about this tragedy and the case. So please give us a call, 323-247-7443. So let's get right into our conversation. Let me introduce our guest. We have community activist Reverend Dr. Lewis Logan II, who is also the co-convener of the Black and Brown, what was it called again?
Black Brown Clergy Coalition.
Black Brown Clergy Coalition. Tony Wayford, president of Choose Life and Health Wellness Center. I Choose Life. Oh, geez, I got it all wrong. But I choose life.
Better get my name right.
You got nerve. Can you spell my name right? And my producer, Steve Burt, who is very passionate about this case and has joined our panel today and
How you spell it?
Got from behind. Can you teach him?
Oh.
And have gotten from behind the engineer to get in on our conversation. So welcome,
right.
gentlemen. So before we get into our conversation on TRAYVON Martin, we're going to play the complete unredacted 911 call that was placed by George Zimmerman on the night. So let's listen to the call and we'll come back and get into our conversation.
Police Department. Line is being recorded. Sean.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. It's Retrieve View Circle. The best address I can give you is 111 Retrieve View Circle. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Did you see what he was wearing?
Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's here now. He was just staring.
Oh, he's just walking around the area?
At all the houses.
Okay.
And now he's just staring at me.
Okay, and so it's 1111 Retrieve You or 111?
That's the clubhouse.
That's the clubhouse. Do you know what he's near the clubhouse right now?
Yeah, now he's coming towards me.
Okay.
He's got his hand in his waistband. Yeah, he's a black male.
Okay. How old would you say he
He's
looks?
got a button on his shirt. Late teens.
Late teens, okay.
Mm-hmm. Something's wrong with him. Yeah. He's coming to check me out. He's got something in his hands. I don't know what his deal is.
Okay, just let me know if he does
Get an
anything,
officer
okay?
over here.
Yeah, we got him on the way. Just let me know if this guy does anything else.
Okay. These assholes, they always get away. Yeah. When you come to the clubhouse, you come straight in and make a left. Actually, you would go past the clubhouse.
Okay, it says on the left-hand side from the clubhouse?
No, you go in straight through the entrance, and then you make a left. Yeah, you go straight in, don't turn and make a left. Shit, he's running.
He's running? Which way is he running?
Down towards the other entrance of the neighborhood.
Okay, which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
All right, sir, what is your name?
George. He ran.
All right, George, what's your last name?
Zimmerman.
And George, what's the phone number you're calling from?
407-435-2400.
All right, George, we do have him on the way. Do you want to meet with the officer when they get out there?
Yeah.
All right, where are you going to meet with them at?
If they come in through the gate, tell them to go straight past the clubhouse and straight past the clubhouse and make a left. And then they go past the mailboxes. You'll see my truck.
Okay, what address are you parked in front of?
I don't know. It's a cut through, so I don't know the address.
Okay, do you live in the area?
Yeah.
What's your apartment number?
It's a home. It's 1950. Oh, crap. I don't want to give it out loud. I don't know where this kid is.
Okay, do you want to just meet with him right near the mailboxes then?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, George, I'll let him know to meet you with you out there, okay?
Actually, could you have him call me and I'll tell him where I'm at?
Okay, yeah, that's no problem.
You need my number or you got it?
Yeah, I got it. 407-435-2400?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, no problem. I'll let them know to call you when they're in the area.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was the 911 call placed by George Zimmerman. So let's jump right into it. Tony, I'm going to start with you. So what were your thoughts when you first heard George Zimmerman's call and his claim of self-defense?
Well, it's not self-defense, but first and foremost, the guy told him to stand down. Two,
when the guy said to the 911 operator said, when he said these assholes always get away, it was clear to me at that point that he was going to he became the police in his head.
Okay.
And that he continued. If you listen to the way he was panting, he continued to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And when he told the guy to stand down, he continued to follow. At that point, worst case scenario, he should have went back to the entrance in the clubhouse and waited on the police and went with them to check out if in fact they needed his assistance, or they probably would have told him stay at the clubhouse. You got a description. We're gonna go into the complex and look for the guy.
Okay, Steve, I see you shaking your head.
No, I agree with everything that he said. I mean, he can't claim self-defense when, like Tony said, you can hear him panting. He's obviously he got out of his car. You could hear the car door open, and then he's pursuing the guy. He admits he's pursuing him, and they tell him they don't need him to do that, and he continues to do it. You can tell by his breath. And, I think it's offensive that, you can allow a guy to chase a kid down or pursue him, which way term you want to use it. And then if, assuming his word is correct, that the kid stood his ground, then he's got permission to shoot him, kill him.
Reverend Logan, what were your initial thoughts when you heard the call and, just got aware of this, the whole case?
I think it hit me at a very personal level as a father.
Okay.
Thinking that this young man was alive at the time when this call was made. He was still moving, breathing, doing his thing. He was not causing any harm to Mr. Zimmerman or anyone else. I think in the way he described him was that he was trying to get away from him. So there was not an attempt on TRAYVON Martin's part to do any harm to Mr. Zimmerman. It was Mr. Zimmerman who was clearly the pursuer and the provocateur in this particular issue. And it just lets me, and the way he was talking about TRAYVON in terms of he had already made up in his mind, he's, as brother Tony said, he was an asshole, he was always trying to get away, that kind of thing.
Okay.
One could also argue that this is the first time I've actually heard the tape in its entirety.
Okay.
But one could also argue that just as he saw TRAYVON, didn't know who TRAYVON was, one could argue that TRAYVON saw him, didn't know who he was, and was trying to run and get away from him.
Yeah. Right.
There was one other thing too. The responder was trying to ask. He was very skilled in asking Mr. Zimmerman questions to kind of get him to back off of TRAYVON. He kept asking him, "Where are you located?
Right.
Where's your car? What's your address?" To try to get him to kind of stand down. Not just in terms of telling him that, but to get him to debrief so he could kind of get out of cop mode into more reporting mode. It was the responder was very skillful in that. I heard that.
Now Zimmerman says that he was using the stand your ground law as his defense when he shot TRAYVON, and Steve is our attorney on record here, who is attorney. So let's talk a little bit about the Florida stand your ground law and racial bias. And before I get into that, I want to just Tony brought this to my attention, or just reminded me about a case of a black woman who in Florida was firing a shot to scare off a physically abusive husband who aggressively was pursuing her, and she got 20 years. She got 20 years. As a mother, a 31-year-old mother of three, Marissa Alexander, acted in self-defense and injuring no one, and received a 20-year conviction. Within 12 minutes, the jury found her guilty of aggravated assault, even though her estranged, abusive husband admitted in his deposition that she had every right to do so. So, Steve, let's start with you. Please explain what the stand your ground law is and how Zimmerman tried to use this in his defense.
Right. Well, he actually, I don't think he's asserted it yet. I think in all the preliminary media, they were saying that this is what gave him the right to do it, and why the police didn't arrest him initially, because they just assumed that he had this stand your ground right. But basically what it gives is a person, if they're engaged in lawful activity, which is questionable whether he was engaged in lawful activity pursuing this kid with a loaded firearm. I don't know Florida law, but if you're engaged in a lawful activity and someone pursues you with the intent to do harm and places you in reasonable fear of death or great bodily harm, then you have the right to use force up to and including deadly force to protect yourself.
Now, how was it that this woman gets 20 years, for defending herself? She didn't even shoot. She just did a warning shot, Tony.
She did a warning shot. And again, I think Steve hit on something very important. There's no way he could claim stand your ground and not go to the penitentiary.
Right.
Because he wasn't standing his ground, because he was told to stand down. So certainly he couldn't use that argument. that he was standing his ground because he was pursuing TRAYVON, and I would argue that if TRAYVON had a weapon, it'd probably been even Steven.
Right.
And
The boy had Skittles and iced tea.
Right.
He didn't even have a gun.
Well, it was clear to me from listening to the video. Mr. Zimmerman had already made up his mind in terms of what he was going to do, in terms of definitely following him, and I believe that he did all he could to escalate it to what we're talking about right now, to actually killing the young man.
But to your point, the whole spectus of stand your ground creates a culture within which one can shoot an African American male with impunity. So just the culture itself fosters and facilitates that mindset and mentality and that modus. You can create a scenario in your own mind, because obviously the brother was kind of zooted on something. He was smelling himself and wanted to go ahead and pursue this young man.
But clearly you can see some racial bias
Certainly.
with this
You can
woman
hear it.
who got 20 years after 12
Absolutely.
minutes, and then George Zimmerman, who we don't know will or will not get acquitted of this crime.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. So let's play a little bit of George Zimmerman's interview with the police right after the shooting and how the nation reacted to this case.
When I shifted, my jacket came up and my shirt came up and exposed my firearm.
Filmed a day after TRAYVON Martin was shot and killed in Florida, these are the statements of George Zimmerman, released by his lawyers this week.
He sat up and looked and said, "You're gonna die tonight." And I felt him take one hand off my mouth and slide it down my chest. And I just pinched his arm and I grabbed my gun and I aimed it at him and fired one shot. He kind of sat back and said, "You got me," or you got me, you got it, something like that. And I thought he was saying that he heard the shot and that he was giving up.
Zimmerman was the area's neighbourhood watch leader when TRAYVON was shot and killed back in February. Police initially failed to arrest him, sparking anger and anti-racism rallies across the US.
Defendant George Zimmerman in case number...
Zimmerman has since been charged with second-degree murder. His defence is self-defence. No date's been set for a trial.
Okay, that's clearly just an old excerpt because he's currently on trial. But Pastor Logan, I want to start with you since you are a community organizer. Discuss the social significance of this case and why the nation was so outraged.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the culture of racial bias. The fact that you're guilty before proven innocent, and that he was walking around, he had his hand in his waistband and that kind of thing. So as a community activist, a father, an African-American male, we are just intimately disaffected by the policy of that whole racist premise that
but it was more than just black people who just mobilized across the country. I mean, this country was black, white. It was a whole lot of people out there with signs, really,
True.
crying out justice for TRAYVON.
But it was our community that was outraged. If it weren't for us getting out there, others probably would not have. And there were others who were equally on supporting Zimmerman.
I was going to say,
based on the premise of the black-brown. I
Yes.
mean, Du Bois's point continues. The issue of the color line is still prevalent today.
And so what benefit did that do? What benefit would you say of the nation getting around, rallying around justice for TRAYVON?
There may have been two. There may have been a cathartic benefit in terms of us releasing steam, because we've seen it in so many smaller pockets, some that are never reported, you never hear about it, that happen all the time, that have happened historically, that have been chronicled since we've been here. And so there's an outrage that I think this was a tipping point in that sense.
Okay.
And then the other side of it was just the idea of us being able to speak truth to power, to speak for ourselves. A lot of community activism and organizing took place within various pockets around the country, and a lot of local community effect went into this. A lot of people mobilized and did something positive with it. Others tried to, of course, pawn and pimp their own little. Okay. Some people were crisis pimps.
I went to a rally out here, Tony. No, I'm just saying. I'm inviting you to comment on just the nation mobilizing.
Right. Okay. I mean, it went both ways.
I think I agree with everything Reverend Logan said. I think I think for a lot of people it was a wake up call because sometimes, especially since we've had a black president, I think we've been asleep at the wheel on a lot of issues as it relates to black people, and I think that was our wake up call that we still have issues to deal with. I think the sad part is, even as you said, the rally that was out here. I went to a couple of meetings, but I couldn't connect the dots. I couldn't quite understand what we were doing or why we were doing.
Okay.
Couldn't understand.
Well, what made you go?
Well, I didn't go.
Oh, okay. You didn't go. Okay.
No, I went to the meeting. I said.
Oh, the meeting.
And
Okay,
I
I'm
asked
sorry.
a couple of questions, and I didn't get a reasonable answer in terms of why was I going, what was it for, and they were saying they were going to create this Trayvon Martin Foundation here in Los Angeles, and they were going to they'd collect all his money and give it to his family. And I asked them at that point in time, well, we got Cry No More who's here and dealing with these issues every day. Ain't nobody ever gave them fundraising. And it didn't make it just what was hurt, as Reverend Logan said, crisis pimping. And I think that's just really sad when we see situations like this, and too often folk spend their time lining up a lawyer that they could argue the case so they can get broke off on the back end. I'm just telling the truth.
Okay.
When it really has nothing to do with the issue, it made no sense. I mean, it was good in one sense because I think it kept those who are passionate about these issues engaged. But at the end of the day, it was pimping of the people. And that's what disturbed me and hurt me. And that's why I did not go.
One of the other contradictions, too, is the fact that it was a white man shooting a black man, black boy. But if we shoot each other
we don't rally.
Day
we would be rallying every day, all day long.
That bothers me right there. So in a sense, that sort of, and some people said this at some of the meetings and some of the rallies, some of the forums and so forth at Faithful Central and other places. But I think if there was any positive out of it, it helped. It woke folk up to what Tony was saying, is that this is not a post-racial society. We are still in a race-based culture that's violent to black people.
And can I just say, because Reverend Logan hit up on an interesting point, because I make it a practice of always keeping up with homicides in Los Angeles County. Do you realize since the assassination of Trayvon Martin back in February, do you give me an idea do you realize how many homicides?
I already know the answer, so I'm not gonna say.
Oh,
in
Los Angeles County, 243
since last February.
Since February, the day he was killed, to June the 8th.
Ridiculous.
243 homicides. And do you realize how many law enforcement killings that have been in Los Angeles County since the assassination of Trayvon?
How many?
91. Wow. 15 this year alone. 15.
That's what we ought to get outraged about.
Yes, and I was teasing because I have a dear friend who works with the sheriff department, and I was teasing about the police killing. I said, well, once you get to 18, do you get a set of steak knives or what's happening with this?
That is horrible.
No, but I'm
praying for brother.
But
still, you see it don't work. But
I'm
still.
But I'm saying
you gotta dip them. You gotta
I'm
dip
afraid
them in the water.
I'm afraid that's contagious.
Like you do grief.
I'm trying to do a sympathetic.
And I was saying, what is? I mean, I was trying. When you talk to police, you got to make it light or they'll kill you. But I was. That's why I said
even your friend.
Yeah, even my friend. My gosh. Yeah. Sleep in the other room. But anyway, that's why I raised the issue. I go, what's going on? And it to me, it's almost. Can you imagine 243 people killed ridiculous. From February 28th to June 8th of this year?
It's worse in Chicago.
Yeah.
But I do want to make one point, and a life is a life,
yes,
and all our black lives are precious, and lives of others as well. Don't get me wrong.
These were only black people.
Okay.
That's the number is higher in terms of homicide in LA County, but these were 243 black people.
Black on black.
These were 15 to date black people.
Okay.
That've been killed by law enforcement.
Okay.
But I want to distinguish this Trayvon Martin killing and the George Zimmerman thing from the black on black killing and from the law enforcement killing. One, because George Zimmerman, even though he thought he is not a law enforcement officer.
You're right.
And the difference with the black on black thing, if you get some blood shooting some Crips or something like that, that blood can't show up at the police station and say, well, he was a Crip, so I shot him, so I'm straight, and go home. I think the outrage on this is that this guy had the audacity to shoot an unarmed kid, and he just gets to walk, and without no question, I mean, it took all that community outrage
right.
to even get them to prosecute, to even get them to arrest him, to even get the DA out there to even press charges.
Right.
Now, with this black on black crime, we're getting hit both ways because we're losing lives, and then the brothers that are committing these things is going to jail.
Yeah.
But they're going to let this dude walk.
Yeah.
If we don't march, this dude walks.
Yeah.
So talk about how this case has kind of highlighted some of the negative stereotypes of our black males and our black boys.
Well, of course, the one thing they did to try to justify on the other end what Zimmerman did was to try to highlight some of the stereotypical presuppositions he had about TRAYVON just by looking at him. He looks weird. He's got a hoodie on. He's got his hand in his waistband. I don't know what's in his hand. What's in his hand? You know, as if he was some kind of, he looks like he's drunk or high or something. And so there was this presupposition that he was a gang member or he was on drugs or something, which was already negative. And he tried to bring that out, in the preliminary statements. At least his defense did.
I kind of see it a little bit different in that it's a challenge because, like Reverend Logan, I have boys as well. And the balancing act, because when we always talk about racial and profiling and whatnot, it's a tough balancing act because I think my boys should have the right to dress however they want to dress. I don't think because they dress like they dress, they should be harassed. They should be arrested. They should be put on the curb. They should be taking photos off and automatically put in a 6-pack. And because maybe I have a name at home that we call him Boo Boo or something like that, because that's what we do in the culture, that now that's all of a sudden that's a gang name. If someone would ask him what you go by, well, they call me Boo Boo at home. Well, now that's a gang name to a culture that doesn't understand how we do things like that. But also I have to tell them, you can do this, but we're in a war.
That's it.
And you make yourself vulnerable. And I don't know how we have these conversations for that balance, because he should be able to dress like they want to dress.
That's right.
But he's also making himself vulnerable when he does that.
Okay.
So how do we balance that out?
Excellent question. Well, we're going to get to that after the other side of the break. This is that you listen to Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit.
The classic.
We're talking about TRAYVON Martin and the George Zimmerman trial. We want to hear from you. 323-247-7443. The phone lines are open. Give us a call. Give us your comments, your thoughts on TRAYVON Martin and the impact on the black community. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation on TRAYVON Martin and the George Zimmerman trial.
Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rise, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
I remember the early days of my business when I started with a personal computer, new business cards, and my line of credit was on plastic.
Now things have changed, and you have a real job-creating business.
Recently, I turned to my bank for a new loan and found out they couldn't meet my needs. I now realize that after the credit crisis, many financial institutions no longer have bankers with the necessary expertise to understand my business or have the ability to provide flexible credit solutions.
You searched for a better solution from someone with financial knowledge of a big bank and common sense understanding of a small business.
I found Michael Banner and the Los Angeles LDC, who solved my problem and exceeded my expectations. Now, when I have a credit or other financial need, my first call is to the Los Angeles LDC. They've earned my trust by providing the best credit solutions and advice at affordable rates and terms. Where do you go when the banks say no?
Los Angeles LDC, a community development financial institution, on the web at losangelesldc.com or by phone 800-366-1178. Loans made under a commercial finance lender's license from the California Department of Corporations.
Interested in advertising your business, product, or service here on The Dialogue? Call 323-547-7748. The dialogue will help you promote your business, increase your traffic, and bring in new clients through innovative and creative marketing packages, including affordable radio ad campaigns for small businesses. Find out more. Call 323-547-7748. That's 323-547-7748. Or go to www.thedialoguela.com. And now, back to The Dialogue. The Dialogue with Starlett Quarles. Real talk, real people.
Welcome back to The Dialogue, Real Talk, Real People. I'm your host, Starlett Quarles, and we're on live at latalklive.com, and we're talking about the Black experience this month on The Dialogue. Our conversation today is on TRAYVON Martin and the George Zimmerman trial. We want to hear from you, 323-247-7443. Again, 323-247-7443. Our guest today, we lost Reverend Logan, but he will be back sometime in the future, but he joined us at the top of the show. But we are still have our guest Steve Burt, our producer here on The Dialogue, and Tony Wayford sharing their thoughts on the George Zimmerman trial and the tragedy of TRAYVON Martin. While we were talking on the commercial break, we were talking about TRAYVON's past experience with weed and his suspension from school and all that type of stuff. How is that relevant, or is it even relevant to this case, Steve?
No, absolutely not relevant. What we were mentioning is that the defense attorneys tried to get this stuff in, and I believe, they knew from the beginning it wasn't going to get in. It was just a way for them to get that information out there because they know the effect that it's going to have on the public at large and kind of taint the public perception and taint the jury pool and all those type of things to say, well, he had weed. I mean, I've seen the reports, and it actually turns out that the amount of weed that he had in his system wouldn't even have gotten him a DUI at the time had he been driving. But even if it was, George Zimmerman hadn't performed any blood test or anything on him, so it was irrelevant to George Zimmerman's motives. But, that's about how this whole thing is. And the reason that I think this is important is because this really is about more than TRAYVON. I mean, all blessings to his family and condolences that are due. But I mean, it's a larger problem where our kids are really stigmatized with this air of criminalization, right off the bat. And I wanted to follow up on what Tony was saying about the way we dress and things like that. I've mentioned this before in a different forum, but there is something to be said about the fact that whether, we got our college kids or just our regular, jocks or whatever, or our thugs, it is very difficult to tell the difference between them. Mm-hmm. There's this thing now that, and like he said, they have the right to dress how they want. I have an 18-year-old in my house. He wants a tattoo. He wears the same clothes. And for someone who's not intimately familiar with our culture, they can't distinguish him from a drug dealer unless they get to know him.
Right, totally.
Right, and I think it's sad. And what you were saying about doing all this investigating TRAYVON in terms of weed, and Clinton smoked weed.
Our president.
Barack snorted cocaine. Where we going?
Did he do cocaine?
He did cocaine.
Is that right?
Where we going?
White horse.
But that I'm saying we all do things in our youth, experimental things. But again, as the brother said, that because you smoke a joint, that gives you justified to shoot somebody.
Exactly.
Right.
That's absolutely insane. And I think we need to have some difficult conversations with each other in our communities. And Steve was right. When you look at when I go through the community, and I've done some number of times, and I see youngsters sagging this, and I look, I go, nah, he ain't no gangster. You can know but pretty much if you're in the streets, you know the ones that's a gangster, and you know the ones that are actually they just doing the style thing.
Right.
And those are things that I think that we need to talk about, things we need to educate and equip our young people how to survive out, because it's rough out here right now.
Now they are in the process of selecting the jury. They're down to 40. Do you think that they'll be able to find and impanel a fair and impartial jury, Steve?
I don't think so.
Why?
And again, that's one of the reasons why I'm concerned, because you mentioned that the nation was outraged, but I would submit to you that there's, if not equal, a close contingent of America that does see Trayvon exactly as that thug. I mean, those terms are used and thrown about. All you have to do is switch on Fox News or go to any of these websites and look at the comments. There's a large contingent, and not just of white people, that just want to say he's a thug, that think Zimmerman's a hero. And if you need further evidence of that, look at his website. He raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's actually what got his bail revoked, because when he came in there and sought bail, he lied or misrepresented to the court
been eating with that money too.
About all that money that they were collecting from that website. So there's people that feel so strongly about what he did that they are willing to donate money to his cause,
and
to,
they've
to
also
help
been
him stay out of jail for shooting an unarmed teenager.
Tony, what do you think? You think they can get a fair and impartial jury?
No. I think, again, this red,
and it's only 6.
This red state Florida, you know what I mean? And as Dr. Craig always says, when you look at these things, if you can racialize crime, you can criminalize a race. And they criminalized this young man, with the hoodies and all that. What bothers me the most, I think, is that I was impressed and happy that we came out with all this fervor, and you saw people in Congress, you saw people in the California State Legislature, and everybody got up to the mic and had on the hoods and all that. But I think but when are we going to actually make a concerted effort to make a difference, as opposed to moments and create a movement?
But what does that difference look like?
A moment. I think the difference is actually doing heavy lifting, doing hard work. I think it's easy to come out here, as they did when they did the little rally for Trayvon. I think it's easy to stand up at the mic and fire people up and collect a few dollars, because people, it's like church. You get in the Holy Ghost, you give some money, get out of the parking lot and say, I'm short on my rent. I think that we have to be serious. I think we have to be serious about it, and I think we also we have to do it ourselves.
Okay.
It's just, like I said, no different than, I think it's great that we're talking about Trayvon, no question. But also, what about the 243? Here downstairs outside these doors,
or the 46 in Chicago in 72 hours.
Exactly.
I don't know what is happening in Chicago. I mean, we are killing each other in just massive numbers.
And again, that's heavy lifting, because, and when you look at this, what hurts me the most, when you look at so-called leadership, they jump on cases I'm surprised that they even did this, because primarily jump on cases where it's actually police abuse, because ultimately, you can bring in your guy who's the lawyer, he can cut the deal, he can also, and then he can, family gets some money, and the guy who referred, who happened to be the leader, he gonna get a cut too. But if we talk about the 42 and the ones in Chicago, where there's no money to be gained as it relates to coming in those communities and dealing with those issues, there's no way you can make any money. So that becomes a challenge.
I want to hear from my engineer, Richard, on this topic. Richard, what do you think? You think they can impanel a fair and impartial jury for for the George Zimmerman trial?
I heard you ask that question earlier, and thank you. First of all, for having me join you on the show. It's the first time we get a chance to dialogue about some of the great topics I'm very anxious to talk about, but I just got permission today.
You're always welcome on our show, Uncle Rich.
There's lots I could say about this, and I told you I didn't want to get involved with the conversation because I knew you were going to have Mr. Walfer here, and I didn't want to get him too fired up about some of the comments I would make. I'm joking, of course, Tony, and welcome back.
Thank you.
But I'll answer that question with a question. I know it's not fair, but when you say a fair and impartial jury in his state, do you mean fair and impartial to Trayvon or fair and impartial to George Zimmerman? Because I'd weigh on the side that if there is an impartial jury impaneled for that trial, it's probably going to weigh on the side of Trayvon. I don't care what people may perceive. I think you guys made some great comments about how people perceive us and some of the bad images we put out there about ourselves, right? But still, a grown man shooting an innocent, unarmed person is what I think will weigh in the mind of any potential juror. And because of that, I think the jury will be impartial on behalf of and to the benefit of Trayvon Martin and his memory and his family. That's how I see it.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a fair jury out there anywhere or impartial. It's one or the other.
All right.
I hope from his lips to God's ears. I hope that he's correct.
Okay.
I'm just skeptical in terms of I don't know if we live in that world yet.
Mhm.
I don't trust. I mean, this is I don't.
You don't think so?
I would hope that you're right, brother.
I'm hopeful and very I've just got a deep belief in the spirit of this country right now, what's really going on. I got to tell you, Tony, I'll put this out there, man, to challenge you. I think it was very irresponsible to say that Barack Obama had been reported as snorting cocaine. He admitted to marijuana. I think it's very irresponsible to put that out there without some evidence, and you need to kind of present that evidence and back it. But again, to my point, I think we live in a more hopeful time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our illustrious president, I weigh in his favor, has promoted that. I was a youth at risk. I'm from Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I went through all of that. I was TRAYVON Martin.
Mm-hmm.
But I think times are different, and I think people are going to at least understand how unfair it was.
So, what was your reaction when the president said that TRAYVON could be my son, and he personalized it?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question. How real is that? I mean, TRAYVON is every black man.
Yeah, that I mean,
this
that may
whole
have done emotional good, but
this whole thing about the CIA and this massive facility they're building in Utah to spy on people. A friend of mine and I were talking about this the other day. I'm like, I'm black. I've been spied on all my life. I've never felt free to walk the street or be pulled up behind by a police car. I still get nervous, and many black men do. So, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question.
And that goes.
Big ups to Barack for saying that, but
that goes
every
to,
black man feels that way.
Okay.
That goes to what you were saying,
Most
though,
of us.
about there being a change in this country, like a transitioning period where we're moving into something that's more, it's working on two things, because we are moving in certain ways towards that. I mean, to be in a position where a black man could win the Iowa caucus, and then ultimately become the president. There are some people that are moving in that progressive way, but it's causing a backlash amongst those other people to go way, way harsher. I mean, the FBI has statistics on the number of hate groups that have cropped up since then, this groundswell in these Nazi and KKK neo-Nazi type groups, hate groups, the amount of, hatred mail and things like that the Secret Service are dealing with. It's at all-time highs, and the type of open bigotry that we see in Congress and amongst these Tea Party people and stuff like that, that some of that stuff is not since the 60s that we've seen this type of thing. So as we make progress, and I think as white people realize that demographically they are shrinking as far as them being the majority and everyone else being called minorities, I think they're putting up a strong resistance to that.
Verily, a man fights harder in death than he does in life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to address a couple things.
I know you do. Go right ahead.
One, I not only I read that he had snorted cocaine. I wasn't saying that I could care less if he snorted cocaine personally, but I did. And if you do remember, I thought what Bob Johnson did during the election, during his first term when Barack was running, the way he was slandering him about having snorted cocaine, I thought that was a little improper.
Okay.
I said that he snorted cocaine because I read that he snorted cocaine. Like I know he smoked some weed. My point was, what's that really got to do with what happened?
Okay.
If he snorted cocaine, if he didn't snort, I just know I read that he snorted some cocaine.
Okay. Well, let's bring it back to
and bring it back.
Just bring it back
to what he was
TRAYVON.
saying in terms of
bring it
in terms
back to
of
topic.
being hopeful. I'm hopeful, but I once read too that one of the greatest sicknesses in the world is to believe something just because you want it to be true. And I can't until they change. I'm skeptical.
Okay. So, do you think George Zimmerman should be convicted, and if so, for how long?
No question. I think he should actually, because of their mandatory minimums. Certainly, if he were to argue stand your ground, when he didn't stand down after being told to stand down, I think he should be charged with the 25 to life, because it's 10 if you brandish the weapon, it's 20 if you squeeze a round off, and it's 25 to life if you in fact shoot someone.
Okay.
And he did all of the above. And because he was told to stand down, I don't know how he could argue stand your ground. The only thing he could argue would be self-defense. And then we still right back at the point of why didn't you stand down when you were asked to stand down by the dispatcher.
Now, what do you think would happen if he is acquitted? How do you think the black community will respond, and how do you think we should respond? Steve?
Well, I don't know how we will respond. My concerns over this are because I was actually present in 1992 when we had the riot, uprising, whatever you want to call it, that started on Florence and Normandy.
Caller, please hold on.
And that's what I don't want to see happen. Not so much because how people say, oh, we're burning up our own communities. We didn't own most of that stuff that got burnt up. So I take that with a grain of salt. I don't want that to be the response because I don't think it's going to make any positive changes. I don't think it's going to lead to any positive change because we've been talking about the whole time what led to this, the environment, the landscape in our society that makes a grown man shooting an unarmed black kid acceptable is that we're already deemed to be these criminals. And so responding in a criminal way only exacerbates that and only makes the problem worse. But I haven't come up with what would be a valid, viable, response that would actually get something done other than, like Tony said, doing the heavy lifting. I mean, we have to attack this on a cultural level because, like we've all been saying, we contribute to that perception with some of our cultural norms. We have to attack it on a legal level. Something has to be done with, the war on drugs and stop and frisk, like in New York and those other things.
The entertainment industry
that actually do make us criminals. So from a legal perspective, there's some things that got to be done. And then, it's just it's a whole holistic type of change that has to go down.
All right, caller, hi, you're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question about the Trayvon Martin tragedy or the George Zimmerman trial? Hello?
Good afternoon. My name is Darius. I'm calling from Inglewood.
Hi. You have a question or comment for our guest?
I have a comment, actually. I want to touch base on something Mr. Burt mentioned earlier in regards to his 18-year-old. And that is that we have a problem in our community, the Trayvon Martin case reflects a problem on multiple dimensions, and that is, identity. He referenced how, if his 18-year-old was walking down the street or some whatnot, how would they know that he's just a regular kid? He's not some troublemaker. And that you can apply that to our community as well. We have a number of kids who are 3.0 GPA students who are just walking down the street and are mistakenly thought of as gang members and, fall into that sort of action. But the reason for my call is that someone, I think your gentleman mentioned, fairness in terms of the jury. What I'm hoping for is some real legislation to come out of this, because I want to make a reference to the young lady's name who was charged with murder in Florida, who I think she had some case with domestic violence and she murdered her spouse, and it was a stand your ground case, but she wasn't given the same latitude as Mr. Zimmerman. And you go back to Casey Anderson. I'm really hoping that this case can really tighten up some of the judicial errors in the Florida legislature. So because we really need to, because it really help our community as well.
Excellent. Thank you for your comment. Steve, you have a response?
No, I agree with them as far as that, some legislative changes that come out of this. And for me, not just with respect to Florida and not just with respect to stand your ground, but just overall the way that, for instance, like New York, I know that their stop and frisk was on trial, their policy at their police, and they justify it by saying crime has been down since they instituted that policy over, I guess, the last 10 years. But their statistics, their very own statistics, show that they don't deny that 88% of the people that they randomly come up to and stop and frisk are either black or Latin, and that sometimes they don't even have probable cause for stopping them other than being black or Latin, which obviously is a huge Fourth Amendment violation, But again, because we're perceived to be the criminal element in the minds of people who think they're being rational. I don't even think they're consciously racist, but they're like, these are the guys doing all the crimes. What do you want us to do? You know what I mean? I mean, if you listen to some of the like Zimmerman's neighbor and some other people that have commented, they're saying, well, we've had these break-ins. It was black guys that did all the break-ins in the neighborhood.
That's what I was going to say in terms of Zimmerman's, racial profiling. I mean, he had somewhat of a justifiable cause just because the neighborhood had experienced that. Not that he was justified in shooting him, but I mean, like you said, Tony, we racial profile our own.
Oh, no question. But that don't carry a whole lot of weight because he was over his daddy's girlfriend's house who lived in the complex who was
No, but
black.
he was going through.
I know.
He was like going through the Dons,
Right.
to the jungle.
Right. But I would hope that, back to your question in terms of if whatever shakes out, I would hope that we create a movement to somehow dismantle this mandatory minimum, because you get folk in there like the brother in, I think it was Florida as well, who actually was giving a guy a ride, and the guy was transporting some dope, and the guy didn't know he was transporting the dope. He was not dirty, never been arrested. Like the sister that's in jail for 20 years, never been arrested, had no criminal history, and because of mandatory minimums, it's even out of the judge's hands to act with some discretion and go, well, no, I'm not going to do this.
Now, you said you have sons, you have a nephew.
Sure.
So what advice are we giving our black boys? Do you know what I mean? If they were in, or what advice would you give your sons? Are you giving your sons, if they were in the same situation as Trayvon Martin, if they were dressed that way, or if Zimmerman came up to them, what advice would you?
I don't allow them to dress like that.
Okay, what happens? They get a
straight
whooping?
up like that.
Thank you, Tony.
No, we've had that conversation.
Okay.
My sons, believe it or not, my sons don't have writing on them. Not that I have anything against it. It's just that we create. What I did in my house, by God's grace, I created a standard, and I was not bending on the standard predicated on Paul Gallup or what everybody was doing on MTV. And that's not to say that I'm not a fool. That's not to say that I don't know. I've seen instances when I drove up and they caught them where they had switched off and carried some clothes. I did that.
Right.
But the deal was we created a standard. When they were under my roof and in my care, their ears and arms and necks belonged to me. I let them use the room that was down the hall. That was my room that I let them use. When growing up, we didn't have a democracy. My house was dictatorship. And fortunately, none of my kids. Now my boys haven't been to jail. Both of my boys I have two granddaughters, right? But oddly enough, this may really rock you because this is old fashioned, real crazy. We went to a wedding first.
You mean you went to a wedding first?
Before we had the granddaughter. I know that's antiquated, you know what I mean? But we set a standard.
Right.
And I'm not deviating from that standard. I don't give a damn what everybody in the world is doing. And we have to talk to each other like we're grown, to one another as fathers and whatnot, and support each other in the best of what it means to be a father and a black man. And if we support each other in those efforts, and we tell, because if you do it by yourself, you look odd. I do it by myself, I look odd. But if our mind come over your house, you go, well, no, we don't do that. We don't do the cussy music over here, partner. You pull your pants over here. You see my wife. You say, good evening, Miss Such and Such, and there's a roof on the building. Take your hat off.
So it starts in the home.
No question.
Okay. All right, Richard.
I wanted to just make this last comment. Once again, Star, thank you so much for allowing me to join you guys. You have a great show. I love it every week. I so want to comment, but so little time and so many ideas and great comments. The overarching issue that I'm sure will continue to be ignored in the climate running up to the trial and the jury selection. We're all going to be paying attention to that, and yet ignoring the fact that there's still loopholes in the gun laws, that you can go to a gun show and get strapped down, that there are, what do they call them, ghost or straw buyers of guns.
Straw buyers, yeah.
The overarching issue is that we have too many damn guns, and I'm sure, Tony, you can relate to this.
No question.
Back in the day when we were coming up, we saw a cat like that. Man, first of all, you had to run home and get the 22.
Yeah.
So you probably wasn't going to kill him if you did get it in time to shoot him.
Exactly.
But we would basically just throw up the dukes and start going at a person like that. It didn't require having to gun them down. We just got too many guns.
Absolutely. Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. What was the question again?
What do we tell our boys? You know what I mean? You got Ty.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you know, what do you tell him in this scenario? I mean, your son. What
I
would
do,
you say?
I do. It's unfortunate, and you know, I tell him, I said, hey man, I remember, you know, being your age. I didn't want to be an outcast. I wanted to be cool. But what I learned was though that, you know, people respected me for some of the differences that I did have, you know, and I always try to impress upon himself to differentiate yourself, man, because you want to follow a culture, you know, of people that, you know, espouse these traits that are viewed negatively, and not just viewed negatively. Most of them are negative. Pants hanging down there. He knows better. He absolutely knows better.
But how do you justify that when you got Jay-Z who talks about, you know, women and drugs, then you got the president endorsing him?
You stole my issue. That's my number one pet peeve with the POTUS.
And the same with Beyonce. I got issue with Beyonce.
That's my number one pet peeve with the POTUS.
You have to educate them that it's game that they're running on our children. Because when he goes to the White House, his pants are up. When he goes to major meetings, his pants are up. He's wearing Brioni. He ain't wearing Jay-Z clothes. And they do that to our children, and they let them pretend that they're keeping it real. I'm sure you've seen Sean when he's gone to the Oscars. Do you see all them Negroes that's usually with him?
Oh no.
He looks like a human being. He dresses like one. It's game that they run on our children, and it's irresponsible for us. And that's what I tell my boys.
It's irresponsible for Jay, and it's irresponsible for Barack to be down with that. Because listen, Barack, under him, these boys getting locked up for following Jay-Z's blueprint. Didn't he put out the blueprint?
Oh, no question. I'm not.
Didn't he put out the blueprint? Ain't that the name of his joint? And does he not say he got his start doing that thing? And he's held up here and exalted and hanging with the president, and you know what I mean? And mainstream media has accepted him, and he's got all this. But all these boys is trying to follow that blueprint to become this guy. They're getting locked up by the droves, and I hate that. I abhor that. That is my number one pet peeve with the POTUS. I'm glad you brought that up.
well, when we talk about our black relationships next month, I'm going to be talking about Beyonce and her portrayal of black women and how she's jacking us up in our relationships. But thank you so much, Tony, for joining us on our conversation on Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. Thank you for coming from behind the mic and talking on Trayvon Martin. Thank you, Richard. Man behind the wheel to steal for us.
Selective. That's on point right there.
We had a community conversation today on Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman trial. Thank you so much for our series, for joining us for our series this month, The Black Experience. As I mentioned, I'm going to be with Bloom next week at their Bloom Initiative and their town hall meeting. So make sure you join us Wednesday, June 26th. We'll still have a replay. We might replay this show, but we're going to have a surprise for you next week on what we're going to replay. As I mentioned, in July, we're going to talk about black relationships, ladies and gentlemen. So we definitely want to hear from you on the foundation of our relationships in our communities and our families, and how we're all just so screwed up, unfortunately. So make sure you give us a call next month. Make sure you join us next month for the Jive, where we're going to be talking about black relationships. I'm Starlett Quarles. This is The Dialogue, Real Talk, Real People. Signing off as my mama's child and my daddy's baby girl. Until next week. Happy Juneteenth.
All of your young life you've seen such a misery and pain. Well, it's a cruel place to live, and it ain't gonna change. You're so young, you've got so far to go. Don't think you'll reach your goal, young man. Look out, y'all.
LA Talk Live, reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we're more than just talk. Stay tuned.